through the Tyler newspapers of 100 years ago, looking at socialists, suffragettes, and chickens, I ran across some very interesting accounts of the founding of the Red Cross here in Tyler at the beginning of World War I. And while trying to track down additional information, I located the official 1919 history, compiled and published with photographs at the Red Cross office on Rick Road. I would like to thank Tammy Prater, who's here tonight, for allowing me to digitally scan this unique document. These two sources, plus the financial account book in the archives downstairs, form the basis of my presentation tonight. The International Red Cross was founded in Switzerland in 1863 during our Civil War. Clara Barton, who had worked so hard here with the Sanitary Commission, saw the Red Cross in action in Europe during the Franco-Prussian War and helped to found an American branch in 1881. They at first assisted in Michigan forest fires, Mississippi floods, a Florida yellow fever epidemic, the Jonestown flood, hurricanes in South Carolina and Galveston, and the San Francisco earthquake. Most American chapters were in the major cities. Dallas formed the first group in any Gulf state in 1906. When World War I broke out in August of 1914, there were only 107 chapters nationwide. But after the United States declared war on Germany in April 1917, that number exploded to 3,864 chapters, and nearly 1/5 of the total population of the United States became Red Cross members. Tyler organized its Red Cross chapter in June of 1917. P.K. Birdwell, Secretary-Treasurer of Carlton Lumber Company, served as chairman. Mary Davenport Bonner was named vice chairman. Earl Jackson, Secretary-Treasurer, followed by E.P. McKenna, wholesale merchandise broker. The executive board consisted of Clara Baldwin, Bertie Johnson, Mrs. Dr. L.E. Smith, Mittie Phillips, L.M. Green, and J.B. Miller. Over 100 people joined at the very first meeting, paying $1 as dues, with half of that going to the national office. This is at the same time that the Liberty Loan Campaign was also gathering money for the war, and while local troops were being raised. The Tyler paper declared, "Tyler is now organizing a volunteer company to send to the front. It will be no sham battle. Your son may go. After our boys have struggled nobly and honorably for the sake of Old Glory, in the face of the enemy's artillery, after the smoke of battle is cleared away, some of our boys will be stricken down. And when they are, we will want to feel that we have helped make possible the care which can only be given by the American Red Cross." Smith County was also sending more than money and troops. Eunice Olive of Pine Springs had received nursing training in Dallas. She was in the first wave of Dallas Red Cross nurses to be sent to Ellis Island for debarkation in June 1917. She wrote to her family, "We have learned that we will be in a base hospital in France and will therefore take care of our own soldiers. So you know that makes us feel lots better." A later letter mentions going to Rouen, which had 14 mostly British base hospitals. The second Smith County Red Cross nurse was Gertrude Brogan, whose brother was a local doctor. She also received her training in Dallas and was shipped out in May 1918, heading for Base Hospital 52 in France, one of the largest. By the end of June, and that's 1917, Smith County had almost 1,200 members of the Red Cross, and it was time to organize the women, mostly from the middle and upper classes with older children, because those were the women who had the most time to volunteer. One of the first projects was constructing and filling comfort bags, with the goal of giving one to each soldier leaving the county. Each bag should be of washable material, 10 by 13 inches, with a drawstring at the top. It should have khaki-colored cotton sewing thread, white thread, needles, needle case, khaki-colored buttons and white buttons in a smaller 3 by 5 bag, a large thimble, blunt pointed scissors, a cake of soap, safety pins, common pens, a small comb, toothbrush, toothpaste, a small round mirror, handkerchiefs, lead pencils, a writing pad, envelopes, postal cards, playing cards or game, a collapsible aluminum drinking cup, a pocket knife, and tan shoelaces. So that bag was full. The headquarters during that first summer was at the high school, with hours from 9 to 12 in the morning and 3:30 to 6 in the afternoon. The next major project was bandage production, and that would continue throughout the war. 13 committees were formed, each with its own chairman, each working on a different particular kind of surgical supply. For example, Mary Douglas was head of a group of women and girls making gauze compresses, folding a 16 by 16 inch square down to a 4-inch pad, 24 in a package, and 144 in a box. Helen Taylor, Mrs. Gus Taylor, headed a group making laparotomy bandages. 78 women were organized for this part of the Smith County Red Cross. Their motto was, not our bit, as in doing our bit for the war, but our utmost. As the lady said in the Tyler Courier-Times, this is America's war, and America's Red Cross for America's soldiers. Therefore, every American should help. Of course, all of this took money, and the Red Cross was constantly fundraising. Besides soliciting individuals, lodges, and businesses for donations, on July 1st, the First Baptist Church held a Sunday Patriotic Day with a special free will offering for the Red Cross. Pastor Yates told his congregation that no man can live unto himself, and no nation can live unto itself, that the United States was fighting a war for worldwide democracy. America is to be the standard bearer of God in championing the rights of the oppressed. The Electric Palace Movie Theater offered a film called The Call of Her People with Ethel Barrymore, with 25% of the receipts going to the Red Cross. The Red Cross also held a huge carnival around the square on August 4th, with booths decorated to represent various nations, a minstrel show, refreshments, aesthetic dances directed by Archie Kutcher. And in that whole book that was the history of the Red Cross, she did the book. And she was the only one that got an exotic kind of portrait in the book. They also had a fortune teller, an address, and band music, followed by orchestra music, then dancing. Between 1,500 and 2,000 attended at 10 cents per head, and over $300 total was cleared, back when $300 was real money. If there were women who could not leave their homes to work at the school, the Red Cross also needed knitting done. Sleeveless sweaters, mufflers, wristlets around your wrist, and socks. Twice the newspaper ran knitting instructions. Mrs. C.A. Caldwell served as chairman of this branch. Louise Mansfield and Ruth Patterson distributed the wool. Liza McCardle and Minnie Wright offered to teach knitting at the school, and Sarah Hall offered private instructions. By mid-September, Tyler High School was set to begin the fall term, so the Red Cross had to find another place to meet. They chose the auditorium of Tyler Public Library, this room, as their new headquarters and workroom. It was well lit and heated, had sanitary tables for bandage making, and 500 workers could be accommodated over the week. Workers had to wear caps and aprons, and those could be bought from the Red Cross for $1.50 per apron and 25 cents per cap. Mondays were for knitting, Tuesday for cutting surgical supplies, Wednesdays for making surgical supplies, Thursdays for making more surgical supplies, Friday and Saturday for more knitting. Mary Bonner appealed to women to give half a day per week to the cause. Consciousness of service well done will always be a pleasing memory to you. Your bandage may save the life of a wounded soldier. Now, of course, the children of Smith County also got caught up with all this enthusiasm and activity, so the Junior Red Cross groups were organized under the overall leadership of Mrs. Frank Williams, with approximately 1,900 members. Almost all of the school children of Tyler, Swan, Lindale, and Winona enrolled, raising funds with entertainments and tag days, cutting and finishing infants' garments for poor French babies, making hospital shirts, and knitting bed socks. Hey, like those hats. A manual training class made all the shipping boxes and tables for one camp hut. Students also financed and participated in a health crusade, promoting good health habits and the control of preventable diseases. In Sarah McClendon's memoirs, she recalls that as a 7-year-old, her father dressed her and her sister in little Red Cross uniforms and took them to the post office to sell war bonds. And evidently, she tried knitting as well. The county-wide Red Cross soon became so large that smaller auxiliaries were formed. Bonner School had 160 members, chaired by Mary Douglas. Douglas School had 75 members under Lovey York. These groups tended to come from lower-income families, with the husband often working in one of the railroad yards. Geography dictated that Lindale have its own auxiliary, which was led by Mrs. J.F. Williams. It focused on knitting at first, and then later Mrs. J.S. Ogburn became chair, and they added hospital garments and surgical dressings. Pleasant Grove was under M.H. Elliott. Mrs. H.M. Shank took charge of Hopewell, and they knitted hospital garments and made clothing for the poor Belgians. Mrs. J.A. Wallace supervised 100 members at Flint. Other auxiliaries were at Bullard, Troop, Arp, Winona, Swan, New Harmony, Holtz, Mount Sylvan, Red Springs, Gresham, Wood Springs, and Garden Valley. The Lady Maccabees, a fraternal benefit association, organized their own knitting circle, as did Cedar Street Methodist Church. This was all happening during Jim Crow law, so unfortunately, African American women were not welcomed into the white organizations. Black Tyler women formed their own auxiliary with over 100 members. The official 1919 history did not link any names to it, but I found one in the account book in the archives. Beulah L. Caswell, age about 36 at the time, was a teacher, the wife of James Cornelius Caswell, a barber on East Irwin, and Sunday school superintendent at Bethlehem Baptist Church. They lived on North Liberty off of the northeast corner of Oakwood Cemetery. Her name appears over and over in the account book as turning in membership funds. And a newspaper article noted that the auxiliary supported black soldiers at Camp Davis, and it did a great deal of knitting. I got involved in this particular story and kept following it. The Caswell's daughter, Zeffie, might have been a junior Red Cross member. She would later attend Wilberforce University, Bishop College, and others, married J.L. Brooks, founder of Brooks Funeral Home, and she taught at Butler College, Port Arthur, and Tyler Public Schools. She would be one of the original members of the local Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority with Willie Lee Glass. Besides the Tyler Colored Red Cross chapter, W.W. Williams brought in memberships from Village Creek and the Mount Olive community east of Sand Flat sent in theirs. One black soldier sent back a poem of appreciation that was published in the Tyler Courier-Times. Red Cross friends and helpers too, it fills the Army boys with joy to know the home folks are so true and never forget their boys. To encourage us is great and shows much patriotism, comes where colored congregate as quickly as baptism. We thank your friends heartily for the Christmas presents sent. To the boys now in khaki, big U.S. we represent. We are going to free the world and bring peace on land and sea, place Old Glory's stripes unfurled when the Kaiser's blood you see. Some say it's hard to whip him, others are nervous and sick. Men from Smith County have vim and shall give him one hard lick. When this war we shall have won and all nations peace declare, may this nation be as one flag and one party fair. One of the Tyler cultural groups that worked hardest for the Red Cross was the Coterie Club. They held frequent concert and recital fundraisers at various homes. The Mickwitz Club, named after the Dean of Music at SMU, sold tickets. In late 1917, they presented a benefit cantata, Pan, at the Electric Palace, which began with an appeal by Galloway Calhoun and ended with one by Cone Johnson. By Christmas of 1917, Red Cross members were busy packing 300 boxes for soldiers training in Fort Worth and San Antonio. The boxes included homemade candy, cake, stuffed dates, figs, salted nuts, fruit cakes, sweetened crackers, chewing gum, chocolates in tinfoil, nuts, khaki-colored handkerchiefs, writing pads, pencils, envelopes, postcards, stamps, books, locally produced scrapbooks, Boy Scout-type knives, checkerboard games, tobacco, mechanical puzzles, pipes, and watertight matchboxes. The Red Cross also sponsored the first municipal Christmas tree in Tyler. Fundraising continued into 1918 with a Marvin Choir Coterie Club benefit directed by Mrs. John Durst to raise funds to replace medical supplies lost when a transport ship was sunk. Both the Electric Palace and the Queen Theater offered benefit showings. So there's the Electric Palace doing a benefit, and then the Queen Theater, not to be left behind, also did a benefit. In May, the Red Cross held its own parade with 150 members forming in line of march in front of the public library with elderly lady knitters in automobiles. They were led around the square by several soldiers carrying a large U.S. flag, ending on the west side of the square with a drawing and auction. This kicked off yet another membership drive. Nothing like getting a huge headline on the Tyler paper. Membership rose to 7,571 persons, 3,159 of those from the city of Tyler. The War Fund Drive published a quota of $11,000 and instead raised $17,000. The Tyler Commercial College building hosted a rummage and record sale, and Dixie Garage furnished a stand on the corner of North Broadway and Ferguson to collect old automobile tires and rubber hoses. In July of 1918, the Red Cross published a report of its accomplishments. It had enrolled nearly 8,000 members, created 3 well-equipped workrooms with nearly 300 women folding surgical dressings and more than that knitting. They were sending out 2, sometimes 3 boxes of bandages a week. 17 boxes of knit garments had been sent out since December 1st, 1917, over 1,000 hospital garments, and 127,600 surgical dressings, with a prayer was interwoven with each dress, is how they put it. But in August of 1918, the Tyler Red Cross commenced probably its most notable, or at least most noticeable, contribution to the cause, the canteen. Archie Crutcher took control of this project, so she actually got 2 pictures in her own history. Mrs. Dabney White was assistant commandant, and that's what they're called in the book. And Paulette Clay served as secretary. Lenora Woldert, Sally Bell, and Mary Cox were considered mothers of the canteen. So there's your captains. The wooden building, oh, I got that one out of order. The wooden building, 16 by 16, was located just 15 feet west of the current railroad depot downtown. It had 12 windows all around, and the exterior was painted gray, and it had a large red cross in the center of the roof. The interior was also painted gray. The windows had curtains, and there were built-in lockers 3 feet wide along 2 sides. One of the remaining sides had the door and a bunk, and the other had a magazine rack and bookcases. The canteen was furnished with brown wicker tea wagon, tables, and rockers. The floor was covered with brown linoleum and brown velvet rugs. All the necessary china, silverware, electric percolator, sandwiches, fruit, candy, cigarettes, matches, postcards, stamps, papers, and magazines were kept in the hut, as well as a first aid medical cabinet. Several blocks south of the hut was a 50 by 100 foot building fitted up with a dining hall and kitchen, decorated with flags and bunting, with long rows of tables, chairs, dishes, etc., to serve 1,000 people. Each day had a separate squad of workers. There were also provisions for sick soldiers who would be taken to King's Daughters Hospital. If possible, the canteen would get advance notice of the needs of a troop train coming through so that they could be prepared. One such special troop train number PD-375 came through on September 6th from St. Louis. The men were provided a chicken dinner, ice cream, cake, apples, chicken salad, potato salad, pimento sandwiches, ham sandwiches, nut sandwiches, pickles, lemonade, ice cream, chewing gum, cigarettes, postcards, and stamps. Officially, World War I ended on November 11th, 1918, but the armies did not disband and return home immediately. A few came home from Camp Stanley near San Antonio as early as December 8th. They were greeted at the canteen with a Christmas tree laden with good things, and stockings for each filled with candy, apples, oranges, and nuts, but no fireworks, for they had had enough fireworks to last them the rest of their days. They were served fruit cake and ambrosia. In January, the canteen was serving as many as 50 men a day, but averaging about 2 dozen. As their work slowed down, the women of the canteen adopted a French war orphan, Francois M. Crapel, 13 years old. On June 14, 1919, the Tyler Red Cross canteen closed after giving out 6,000 magazines, 30,000 sticks of gum, 24,000 sandwiches, 15,000 chocolate bars, 15,000 packages of cigarettes and matches, 1,000 cigars, 100 pounds of tobacco, 15,000 postcards, 7,000 lunches, 5,000 meals, 1,000 bushels of fruit, 1,000 pounds of candy, 300 gallons of coffee, 200 gallons of ice drinks, 100 gallons of ice cream, 1,000 cookies, donuts, and pies, serving a total of 12,517 soldiers. They can keep count. They can keep those records going.
Was the bookkeeper.
So, these women, this is actually sort of part of the same women. They're doing suffragettes, doing a lot of other things, and they are well organized. They have come through the women's club movements, so they know how to organize things, and as soon as they turn around after this war, they're going to go back after suffrage. Let's see. June 14th was also the day that the 133rd Machine Gun Battalion, part of the 36th Division, reached Tyler at 6 p.m. Shop whistles blew loud and long as the train left troop, notifying business houses to close. As the train rolled into the Tyler station, all bells, car horns, shop, and train whistles saluted the boys by blowing 10 full minutes. Dozens of Junior Red Cross girls in white robes bearing garlands and scattering flowers from golden baskets made a pathway of roses upon which the soldiers tread as they marched towards the square. Lieutenant Hendry dropped from his airplane hundreds of all colors of roses on the heads of the heroes. J.W. Miller of the YMCA served as bandmaster for the 50-piece Cotton Belt Band, directed by Professor Whitty. They were followed by William Bostic, flag bearer, and Ed Tarbutton on a black horse, leading the mounted police force and fire department. Major Davidson of Dallas, in charge of the battalion, and Captain Will Harrington, battalion adjutant, came next. Immediately after them came our beloved boys, God bless them, with heads erect and chests thrown out. These handsome, brown-clad men, 600 strong, marched with the ease and grace of generals of old to the stirring strains of, guess what? Dixie. Not it's Tyler, yeah. They marched up Spring Street and around the square, returning to the review stand. Henry Bell Marsh officially welcomed them home, and then Professor Whitty, that's Witt, sounded mess call. All the soldiers filed to the east side of the courthouse plaza, where 14 tables, 40 feet in length, decorated with flowers, flags, and bunting, groaned beneath their load of good things to eat. Beside each plate was placed a package of cigarettes, chewing gum, and a box of matches furnished by the canteen, as well as 10-cent cigars donated by the Chamber of Commerce. The 133rd Machine Gun Battalion included some Native Americans from north of the Red River. One was reported to have said, "Heap good feed at Tyler, heap good people at Tyler, Tyler is the best place on earth except Oklahoma. By October, Archie Crutcher had written up the history of the Red Cross work in Smith County during the war and had sent one copy to St. Louis. They were very impressed. However, it was now time to figure out what the Red Cross would do locally during peacetime. They moved into an extension of the Home Service Program, helping families of soldiers and sailors, helping returned soldiers, family relief, and disaster relief. They were especially interested in maintaining community standards in child care, physical and mental, assisting in health education, and improving working conditions. The local chapter hired Mary Ann Cross, a civilian relief worker, and she suggested the hiring of a certified Red Cross community health nurse, which was done by 1921. They often worked through the schools and also organized community classes. As far as our local Red Cross nurses went, Gertrude Brogan came home on August 12, 1919. She went to work on a number of relief efforts in the wake of floods and tornadoes. She became the first woman to join the Faith Baldwin chapter of American Legion, Post Number 12 in Tyler. On April 21, 1932, she died at the National Soldiers' Home in Dayton, Ohio, after suffering a stroke 3 years before. Her funeral mass was held at Immaculate Conception, and just as the returning soldiers had received, O.C. Palmer scattered roses from an airplane as the procession made its way down South Broadway to Rose Hill Cemetery. At the cemetery, members of the Faith Baldwin Post of the American Legion conducted military services, and a volley was fired as the casket was lowered. She was honored with a military tombstone. On July 23, 1949, Eunice Olive, formerly of Pine Springs, died in a veterans hospital in Los Angeles. After the war, she had been the first student in Baylor's class of anesthesia, and she later did private nursing. She is buried in Oakland Cemetery in Dallas. Thank you. Any questions?
I've got one.
Okay.
You've got a great list of the leaders of the various groups. Are there large lists of all other volunteers?
I've got them all in alphabetical order and started running them through the city directories for 1917 to see, because I wanted to see who these women were, who their husbands were, because sometimes you have married names and sometimes you have their first name. And then what did their husbands do for a living? So that I could start to see who was being pulled for leadership roles or for just working. And that's where I started seeing that some of these are bankers' wives, some of these are big store owners or hire mucky mucks with a cotton belt. And then when you get to the school level, then you started seeing people who were working in the shops. Their husbands were working in the shops. And then a lot of these women are going to be, well, their kids are up and can take care of themselves. They're not mothers generally with small children. There may have been some knitters that could do that at home, but being able to have child care while you come up here for hours, some people just couldn't do that. So I do have a list.
Do you know approximately what the population of Tyler was in that time?
In 1915, it was 15,000. So it's a pretty good sized little town. It's amazing what all's going on about that time, because I've been just pulling different themes out of the newspapers of that time. We would like to be able to do an issue of Chronicles when we ever get that going up again that's totally devoted to World War I and have it done by the centennial of World War I.
Even for a city of that size, that's still an awful lot.
Well, the patriotic push was just amazing, how getting involved. To me, it was more like the North was during the Civil War with the Sanitary Commission and the Christian Commission. The South, being where the war was taking place, they would just, and being so rural, didn't have that good of an organization. So this was very much like the old Sanitary Commission was during the Civil War. But you notice how, I mean, these people are hands-on in the war. We have wars and it doesn't touch us. It's over there. There's factories to make bandages and clothing and everything. We're just not involved. And these people were actually sending the bandages, the clothing, everything for these soldiers, so it's much more a hands-on thing. And then with all this pressure to join the Red Cross, do the Liberty Bonds and everything, there were still people who didn't think we should be in this war, that didn't have really that much to do with us. And so there was, about the same time, a trial of 20 to 30 men from Rains County for trying to discourage the draft, because it went almost immediately into the draft. World War I did. There was not a long lead-up time period for volunteering. Wilson figured out pretty quickly that they were going to need to draft. And it's a huge, for lack of a better word, a big propaganda push all along through World War I to get people involved and behind it. Any
Other questions?
questions? Yes.
I want to say, if you enjoyed this presentation, just come the 23rd. Text no.